Picture this, Jane Austen, but instead of a bonnet and quill, she's got an iPhone and a dating app. In Austen's era, courtship was a delicate dance of glances, letters, and social gatherings. Today, it's all about profiles and instant messages. Jane Austen turns 250 this year, and if you think that makes her too old for Tinder, think again. Imagine her swiping through profiles, judging characters with the same sharp wit she used to critique her suitors. What would she make of ghosting? Or the quick-paced rise and fall of online relationships? Despite the digital shift, some things remain unchanged. The search for love, the games of pretension, and of course, the occasional heartache. So, what would the queen of 19th century romance think of modern dating? In Austen's world, if someone disappeared without explanation, it was either war, scandal, or they had a duel at dawn. Today, it's just ghosting. I think ghosting would horrify Jane. In her novels, even the worst cads like Mr. Wickham at least sent a letter explaining their villainy. Today, not even a thumbs up. Today, people disappear into the digital mist without so much as a waving hand emoji.
According to a recent article in The Spectacle, 61% of single millennials admit to having ghosted someone, as well as 78% of Gen Z.
At least back then, ghosting came with stakes. Reputations were ruined, inheritances lost, dual invitations sent. Now it's just left on red. And here's the thing, Austen's drama unfolded in a world where your social circle was about 150 people max. Today, you've got thousands of potential suitors in your pocket. But somehow, it still feels like the same cycle of confusion, heartbreak, and miscommunication. Elizabeth Bennet turned down a marriage proposal from a man with a literal estate. That's main character energy. Austen's heroines didn't marry for convenience. They wanted respect, love, and a decent conversationalist. In Austen's world, marriage was the only career path for women. Saying no wasn't just bold, it was economically reckless. In the early 1800s, women couldn't own property if they were married. Their wealth, if any, legally became their husbands. Love was great, but survival came first. And yet, Austen's heroines refused to settle. Elizabeth Bennet didn't want a part of her status. She wanted respect, conversation, and someone who wouldn't embarrass her at dinner parties. In 2024, 80% of women aged 25 to 40 say they'd rather stay single than be in a relationship that doesn't meet their standards. Modern women might not be worrying about inheritance laws, but we're still dealing with pressure to marry well, just rebranded as finding the one who supports your goals, shares your values, and maybe also her dog. In both Austen's time and now, there's this tightrope walk between love and pragmatism. But in 2025, we've added an extra layer: independence. Careers, finances, therapy sessions. Women are coming into relationships whole, not waiting to be completed.
According to a YouGov poll, half of unwed Britons who do not want to get married say they do not see the point in doing so, while 34% say they don't think marriage is right for them, and another third thinking that the idea of marriage is no longer relevant.
Jane's ladies had 5 eligible bachelors in the village and had to make it work. We've got thousands at our fingertips. Too much choice can be paralysing. Austen would call it an abundance of unsuitable suitors. In Jane Austen's day, the dating pool was basically the guy at church, your cousin, or some man with sideburns who owned sheep. And yet, they managed. Flash forward to the late 1800s, and Lonely Heart ads became a thing. People would actually write letters to newspapers hoping to meet someone. Kind of like Tinder, if Tinder took 3 weeks and smelled like ink. Back then, you wrote a literal ad for love. Today, you just post a mirror selfie and pray your mutuals don't see it. Whether it's one ad in a paper or 1,000 profiles in your pocket, love still feels like a long shot. Austen would have had a field day with this swiping madness. Austen's novels were full of women making tough romantic decisions, often pressured by society to marry well. To decode the mess of modern romance, I spoke to journalist and dating expert Nichi Hodgson, author of The Curious History of Dating, From Jane Austen to Tinder. She absolutely still influences today's conversations on dating, because in many ways, she shaped how we understand romance, romantic foibles, plot twists, and the difference between good and bad men. And today, Nichi says we're in the illusion of choice. Dating apps make it look like we have unlimited options. That's not really the case. Opt to go it alone is still in the minority. In the modern world, we are under the illusion of having unlimited options, because that's what dating apps present. Sure, we can technically marry more broadly across class and race, but few people do. Most still partner up with their own socio-economic class. The girl boss era is today's version of the marriage market, where women feel pressure to succeed in every aspect of life. And yet, much like Austen's heroines, modern women are trying to juggle it all. Modern dating is a mess, but to really understand how far we've come, or haven't, I wanted some historical perspective. I sent an email, modern tragedy, to the Jane Austen Society. Here's what the Chair of Trustees, Heather Thomas, had to say about what our beloved authoress would think of digital dating 200 years later.
What would she have made of online dating? Well, I think she'd have approved of these online websites because one of the difficulties for her characters and for her whole social class as women, how do you meet eligible men whom you might actually like to marry? Because men were in very short supply owing to the war. Men who had enough money and interest to marry somebody penniless were in even shorter supply. And her characters struggle with this. One thing which is different now is that if you get married and it's a mistake, you can unwind it. And there's no stigma attached now in most communities to doing it. In Austen's day, hardly anybody divorced. But I think the online mischief that you now get with trolling and abuse, I think she'd have been appalled by that, as are we all. And she would have been no different. It would have been distressing to her to see that women in particular had to undergo that kind of abuse. Otherwise, I think the idea that you could encounter people without too much risk to yourself if you were careful, she would have regarded as a good thing. And also, of course, the fact that women don't now financially have to marry. Because in her day, if you were a certain kind of woman who was from the genteel section of society, you were too genteel to work, save maybe as a governess like Jane Fairfax in Emma. So the idea that women could now be well educated or educated to a certain level, they could hold down jobs, they could keep themselves. She'd have been delighted, I'm sure, with all of that as a safeguard. I'm not sure women these days realise how much of a safeguard it is that you can make your own way, more or less, in the world with your own efforts, because she earned a certain amount from her publishing, but it was negligible, really, in the scheme of things, and certainly not enough to keep her with a roof over her head and food on the table.
With what do you think of modern dating? What other trends do you think are quite similar?
I mean, society then was very, very confined. The particular strata of society in which she moved was very confined. But still, finding out about people, digging into people's backgrounds, could be quite hard to do. And there was a certain amount of misinformation around. So if you think about Wickham, all right, he's a glib talker and he, typical con man, really, he judges his audience terribly well, appeals to their sympathies. Darcy, in effect, protects him by keeping silent. And so all sorts of people are misled about the kind of person he is until eventually it all unravels on him when he has to leave Brighton, chased by his creditors. And I think today it can be equally difficult to make judgments about people who are glib talkers and show themselves in a good light. They're probably a bit more well equipped technically. You think of men who equally, I think, are without remorse, get close to women who have something to offer, who are, reasonably wealthy, and basically con them out of their money. They are the modern day Mr. Elliots. They lie about their provenance. They lie about their motives. They sometimes lie about their names. And in Eliot's case, it was because he wanted to detach a threat from his inheritance. But the technique is really just the same. He pulls the wool over her eyes by feigning interest in her romantically, which, although she's quite a scheming person and not a stupid one, she falls for it because he's good at it. And I just think the means are so very different and the extent of it is so different now, largely down to the internet, that you can do this on a grand scale. You can stay anonymous and therefore out of the reach of any kind of retribution in a way which in her day was probably much more difficult to do because society was so small at that level.
So obviously Jane Austen's novels are still widely read today. What would you recommend reading first?
I think Sense and Sensibility is quite a good place to start. And Persuasion is also quite a nice book, I think, to read. It's a very sentimental book in a lot of ways, very mellow book. My particular favourites are, I sometimes wonder whether I would take to my desert island either Emma or Mansfield Park.
Austen might raise a skeptical brow at selfies and situationships, but she'd get it. At its core, Modern dating is still about connections, courage, and choosing love over social expectation. The truth is, dating has always been complicated. Compare the sheer variety of today's dating apps with Victorian matrimonial papers, and you'll see that while our options have expanded, the goalposts have shifted. Marriage, at its lowest level since 1895. But dating has a diamond bright future.